It's been a pretty sad week so far because a brutal and bloody war has broken out in Israel, and it happened after Hamas did some really barbaric acts of terrorism on Israel. And many lives have been lost so far, and many more are likely to be lost. So to discuss this and the rest of the week's news, including party conference season, is joining me as MSP Alasdair Allan. Welcome to People and Politics. Alasdair, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again, David.
Thank you, Gray. Well, there's a lot to talk about today. I thought, if you don't mind, we'll start by talking about you, and then we'll get on to some of today's news, such as the terrible war in Israel, and then we'll get on to party conference season.
Okay, that sounds like a fair variety.
Yeah,
that sounds like a fair variety.
Yeah. So you've been NSP for the Western Isles since 2007, and I always had you then as from that part of the world. But I was wrong.
You were wrong. Yeah.
All this time you grew up in the borders.
Yeah, so I grew up in the borders. That's where I'm from, and went to a wee school. Well, I say a wee school, a school with 15 pupils, in the countryside in the borders near Selkirk, and Selkirk High School. So yeah, I've always been interested in the islands, and I've spoken Gaelic since I was 18 or 19. But no, I claim no ancestry in the Western Isles, so I'm an incomer.
Well, I do think it's funny because I always thought you were from up there, but and I read that you went to I think it's St Andrews, and then you did your PhD in languages. So languages must have been really important to you from a young age.
Yeah, I suppose I was always interested in languages and literature, and that's what I studied at Glasgow and then at Aberdeen. And I suppose got interested in languages at school because it was one of the last state schools in Scotland where Latin was an option. So I suppose I got into languages that way, but it was Gaelic and Scots that took my interest, and that's what I studied. Yeah.
Great. And when you left university, I think you worked for a while in the Church of Scotland, and then I first met you when you were working as parliamentary assistant, which must be getting near 20 years ago.
I think it must be
a while
ago. So yeah, so I worked for a while, as you say, for Mike Russell as his assistant in Parliament. Really, when the Parliament was first re-established in 1999, and a wee while after that, I worked for a while as press officer to the Church of Scotland. I managed to stay a student for a very long time as well, so that accounts for a fair bit of my career.
Yeah. Well, you're probably political. Well, where did politics come in?
My dad was always very political. My dad was always, with some justification, I think, shouting at the television at Mrs. Thatcher. So I suppose the poll tax's introduction in Scotland and the kind of political turmoil around that and the campaign for there to be a Scottish Parliament was what got me involved in politics in a voluntary capacity. And to be honest, most of my involvement in politics has been in an unpaid voluntary capacity. I'm lucky enough that in the last few years it's been my job as well. But yeah, it's always been an interest.
That's great. And as I said earlier, you've served in the Scottish Parliament from I think 2007. You sit on a number of parliamentary groups, which we will come back to them later. Yeah, but I wanted to talk, if you don't mind, about the war in Israel. It's pretty ghastly. It's not a lot of people are dead so far. I think according to the Lunstead News, about 1,200 on each side so far, but many more predicted because it's almost time to escalate.
Yeah, as you say, it's a tragic situation, and of course, it's been a tragic situation for many years. But it's turned into something really horrendous in the last few days, and clearly, Hamas is to be absolutely condemned for the killing of people and the taking of hostages and the outrageous, horrendous abuses of people in Israel. And I suppose the question is what comes next. And the thing to remember in all this is, I suppose, is that Gaza has roughly half the population of Scotland. But if you can imagine half the population of Scotland crammed into, Dunfermline or maybe half of Fife or something, that gives you an idea how many people are in a confined space there. And half of those people are children. Population is unbelievably young. So outrageous as the behaviour of Hamas has been, and absolutely to be condemned as it is, there's another 2.5 million people there who can't be punished and who have nowhere to go because the border with Egypt is closed. Right. So I'm sad to say that although they've clearly been absolutely provoked by these outrages, we all have to stop and think about what happens if that a war is taken to somewhere as crowded and as full of children as Gaza is.
That which is almost out going to happen at the moment, and I mean, as you say, you have to utterly condemn the actions of Hamas. It is barbaric and brutal what they've done, and there's no justification for that whatsoever. But there's a long history there of real brutal oppression and they've been heading as you say, that densely populated piece of land. And
well, of course, these are people who have been, as you say, hemmed in over the decades to the point where, they're in the Palestinian or Arab population are in a very, very confined space, and the border is closed with Egypt. So the opportunities for women and children and civilians and everyone else in that part of the world is pretty limited. And I really, all I can really say is I hope that people come to their senses, and I know it's easy to say of the Middle East. I hope that people find peaceful solutions. Many things have been tried, but whatever solution there is, it has to be fair to both the Arab and the Israeli populations in that part of the world, and it can't involve people just being crammed into tinier and tinier spaces, and not to expect bad results.
No. And I don't know if you noticed, on Monday, it was, of course, the Labour Party conference, and the press were all over people in the conference asking them to condemn the the actions of Hamas because the press are so sensitive because of the history of anti-Semitism and accusations that I know that they were all over the Labour Party. And of course, quite royally, I think all the politicians are taking them Hamas. All but one that I saw. But that's a very complicated thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any difficulty at all in condemning Hamas. I mean, you just need to look at what as you say, I mean, you just need to look at what they've done. And I don't have any difficulty whatsoever in condemning them. But one of the principles of international law is that we don't believe in collective punishment. So you can't collectively punish 2.5 million people for the actions, however wicked they are, of one particular group of people. So, I mean, I just hope that international attention is brought to bear on the humanitarian problem in the first instance, and the need for a humanitarian corridor. I mean, we've got to be
because
the government in Israel is turning off not just the electricity and the broadband, but the water.
That's right.
The 2.5 million people potentially, that is going to create it's already a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yeah.
That is going to result in catastrophe unless other people are allowed in to provide food and water.
Yeah, that's right. And the Israeli government have said that the oil bombing targets of Hamas, which is pretty spurious enemy. And they keep telling people to flee and go elsewhere. But as I said, there's nowhere they can go because they can't get out of Gaza. So
Israel has a right to defend itself and to defend its existence as a state, in my view. But as you say, that there's no point in saying to people in a place as crowded as Gaza, probably one of the most crowded places on earth, that there's somewhere else to go and to escape the bombs, because there just isn't.
Which raises the whole question on telly. There's so much been banned about Israel committing war crimes, and I'm the super guy in breath as this morning and saying, look, both sides, Israel and Palestine, whatever happens, they must stick to international law, and it's very clear that so far Israel are not sticking to international law, particularly when I talk about cutting off water supplies to the Gaza Strip, and I
think the best thing that could be done for Israel to show, as an Israeli government, to show good faith in this, would be to allow some kind of humanitarian corridor to allow people in to provide help. As I say, what's happened to Israel is atrocious, but the answer cannot be to deny people food and water.
No. And that if that doesn't constitute war crime, but it comes to innocent civilians, I don't know what does. And that is very serious. And the other thing, was I correct reading that the Home Office have tried to bring a law that if you wave a Palestinian flag or been shown to support the Palestinian state, that they get in trouble for that. I'm sure I saw somebody in London getting stopped by the police for waving a Palestinian flag. Have you heard anything about this?
It's to my knowledge, it's not a criminal offence. Certainly not a criminal offence in Scotland. I mean, I think everyone who commentates on the situation in the Middle East, I think everyone has a duty to be careful. There are people who lazily slip over from criticising the policy of the Israeli government into some kind of wider, commentary about the Jewish people or something like that, and that's clearly not acceptable.
No.
And I think that we all just have to be clear, though, that people are entitled to criticise the policy of the Israeli government, as they're entitled to criticise the policy of the Scottish government or anyone else. We have to maintain that distinction. And I think there is a duty, however, on everyone who does so, to be aware of the distinction between doing that and criticising a whole racial or ethnic.
Is that where the anti-Semitism debate gets kicked off? Because there are a lot of people critical of the Israeli government's treatment of Palestine, but I'm seeing some people say that's anti-Semitic, but actually no, it's nothing to do with religion. It's just the way that they treat the Palestinians.
I think we have to be alive to the reality of anti-Semitism does exist, and we've seen the consequences in Europe of where anti-Semitism leads. So anti-Semitism is a real phenomenon, and Jewish people are on the receiving end of that prejudice. But I'm satisfied that criticising the actions of the Israeli government does not constitute anti-Semitism.
That's part normal. Well, it remains to be simple and false, but I don't think it'll be pretty whatever it is. Do you think it's been well reported? Do you think it's reported balanced in a balanced way at the moment?
I think most journalists are making an effort to do that. I think what's being reported is being reported fairly. I mean, for instance, the atrocities against Israeli citizens and so on, that is absolutely and should be world news. I think it's just about making sure that we continue to take an interest and continue to make sure that as time goes on that we're taking a proper interest in what happens in that part of the world and trying to find solutions as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll just have to wait and see what unfolds, and just hope that they not too many lives are lost. But in the full flow of party conferences, and what do you think of the show so far?
Well, I'm only going to one conference, so in a couple of days' time to Aberdeen for the SNP conference. Conference season is always a chance for people who are involved in political parties to get together. It's not often as an activist, which I still consider myself to be. It's not often as an activist you actually get a chance to meet people from around the country who are engaged in the same cause. It's a chance to renew old acquaintances and also a chance to be enthused. I'm sure the First Minister will do that, although incidentally, coming back to what you were talking about a minute ago, the First Minister has got his own worries, not got his own worries to seek just now, given that many of his wife's family are in Gaza. But I think it's a chance. It's a chance for the SNP to look forward.
Yeah, of course, and the Conservative conference seemed to absolute shambolic and sometimes rough ride for Rishi Sunak into the absolute shambles that we knew that what he was going to announce before they even got there. And then we had the Labour Party conference where Keith Starmer got covered in glitter. And have you ever witnessed that at a conference? Somebody coming in and getting as a protester.
Yeah, I mean, the First Minister, I thought it wasn't annual conference, but it was another SNP event. The SNP leader, First Minister Hamza Yusuf, managed to deal, I thought, pretty not effectively, compassionately, I suppose, with somebody who wanted to speak to him about something and interrupted his speech. I hope it doesn't become a tradition that we interrupt our speeches, but I think I would say Hamza's shown that he's able to deal with it when it happens.
Actually, when you were talking, I think it was somewhere like the care hall. And
I think it was. Yeah.
I remember that, but I think the best record has been the one that handed Theresa May the P40. That was pretty.
Yeah, that was
no big scene or anything.
She shouldn't really have picked it out of his hand. I don't think that was the mistake she made there.
That was the mistake. So what's on the agenda for the SNP this weekend, or did I ask?
Well, I mean, on the sort of policy front, I mean, there's everything from renewable energy to we're talking about the future of the independence campaign. We're talking about human rights. We're talking about asylum. I'll be speaking on, well, I will try if I can get in. I will speak on the asylum debate, given that it has an impact on an issue in my constituency. There will be many things discussed, and there will be fringe events as well, as there are at all party conferences where there's a chance for people from the world outside the party to come in and have their say too.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Just go back to the committees that you're sitting. So you're on the committee for crofting and the Highlands and sort of the islands and coastal, and of course transport must be important. And the big question is, you probably knew what's going on.
Yes.
What's the way to study on the ferries? Where are the ferries?
Well, I mean, in terms of the ferries, the longer term position is promising because a lot of money has gone in. I mean, in my own constituency, there are, I'm going to get the number wrong here, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the piers which either are on or serve the islands have been replaced. 2 of the major vessels are either have been replaced or are about to be replaced. 3 of them potentially. But the problem is the short term, and the reason for that is simply that governments for the last 20 years have not been building ferries at the rate that they've been wearing out, or also not been building them at a rate that keeps up with the fact that the demand, particularly in the summer, to travel has doubled, I think, in that time. Yeah. So the only answer is to build more vessels. There's 2 building on the Clyde, famously. There's also another 4 being built in Turkey just now. And then there's a process after that to build some smaller vessels. But there is no getting away from it. That at the moment, when one vessel breaks down, there is often not a vessel to replace her. And that's, at its simplest, what the problem is.
Yeah. And given that Scotland was at one time a sort of shipbuilding capital of the world, it was really on the world stage of shipbuilding. What has gone wrong that we can't even produce a couple of ferries?
Yeah.
For the quiet.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's disappointed about that. I mean, I think that, as you say, Scotland was the shipbuilding capital of the world at one point 100 years ago. 50% of the ships afloat in the world had been built on the Clyde. And I think that there have been numerous inquiries as to what went wrong at Port Glasgow, but it would appear that although the workforce were very good, that the facilities and management at the yard did not manage. Well, we know they did not manage to build 2 ferries at once. There have been parliamentary inquiries about that. There have been government inquiries about that. It's certainly not a situation that anybody would relish or welcome. Obviously, the consequence of that is that if the first of these, the original 2 vessels that Ferguson's were given had been, because the fact that they were delayed by so many years means they've not been in a position to build any more after that. And that's why the ferries fleet that as we've seen, has been aging badly.
Yeah. How many million pounds is it over budget? It is eye-watering.
I mean, I'm going to get the figure wrong. I'm going to get the figure wrong, but I mean, it's several times over budget.
Yeah,
So I think it's 3 times over budget.
Yeah, would you agree? People should be more than disappointed. They should be pretty angry about that, actually.
Yeah, well, I think there's no getting away from that. That is a bad, very bad outcome, and I don't think anybody would pretend otherwise. As I say, for me, the solution from a local point of view is to try and make sure more ships get built. There are more getting built just now, as I say, but without more ships being built, the problem can't be solved. I am confident, as I say, that 2 or 3 years down the line, in fact, hopefully 1 or 2 years down the line, we'll see several more ships in the CalMac fleet. The problem is getting through the next year or two with an aging fleet of vessels.
Yeah, it's a shame also that we've got 3 being built in Turkey, when presumably that could create jobs and infrastructure and revenue, right here at home. But so why has it been outsourced to Turkey?
Well, obviously, I'm not privy to it, but there would have been a procurement process, and Ferguson's, obviously, given that they still have 2 ships to finish, were not in a position, perhaps, to come out on top of that procurement process. But I wasn't privy to that, so I can't say.
Well, I thought that they get sorted soon, and we've got 2 years. 2 years left of this parliamentary term, and the SNP got elected last time on the basis that they would hold a referendum in this term, and time's running out, and I wonder.
Well, the SNP policy.
That was happening.
Sorry, I interrupted you there, David. I misheard you there. On you go.
I'm going to say whether you thought it would happen during this parliamentary term or not, and the pressure on Hamza Yusuf to hold on.
Well, the SNP's policy is to have a referendum, and the only reason that a referendum's not happening is because the UK government have effectively banned it. So in 2014, the UK government devolved temporarily the necessary powers to enable the Scottish government to have a referendum on independence. They won't do that this time round. So, the reason that a referendum's not happening isn't because we don't want one. The reason a referendum's not happening is because the UK government won't allow it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think would you agree that Brexit, in some ways you see Brexit as a reason to hold one, but I think a lot of people see Brexit as a reason not to hold one, because I think
it'd be fair to say that the Brexit referendum was not a triumph of democracy. I mean, I think the Brexit referendum was an example of a government that held a referendum and then worked out what to do afterwards. I don't think anyone could say that the 2014 independence referendum was like that, but we had a year and a half's worth of pretty detailed debate about what was on the table. And I'm sure that a future independence referendum would be similarly well informed. I think what Brexit and the Brexit referendum has done is it's clarified that Scotland doesn't ultimately get a choice about the big things that happen to it. So we don't ultimately get any choice about whether we're in or out of the EU. 62% of people in Scotland voted to stay in the EU, and we're coming out. Not just that, but Scotland is coming out of everything, along with the UK, free movement of people, coming out of the European single market and everything else, customs union, and we don't get any say in it. So I think the Brexit experience has clarified for a lot of people why the UK doesn't really work for Scotland.
Yeah, but we had a say in 2014 and we voted very clearly to stay in the EU.
Well, in the UK, well, we didn't.
I'm sorry, to stay in the
Yeah.
UK. And okay, we've had Brexit. But I find it difficult why we'd want to, key links would want that you'd want to build an economic barrier between us and the rest of the UK, which 3/4 of our trade go with, at the expense of being in Europe, where we would just be a tiny fish in a big pool. If we got in, it could be a decade before we got in there.
I mean, in terms of being a tiny fish in a big pool, I mean, the thing about the EU is it's actually very popular with small countries who find that it actually gives them an influence and a place and in a political union of equals. I mean, that's obviously not the situation in the UK. In terms of why we're still arguing for independence, I mean, the fact of the matter is that opinion polls and everything else would tend to indicate that support for independence is as high, if not perhaps slightly higher than it was at the time of the referendum in 2014. Now, you can speculate about the reasons for that, given Brexit is one of them. But ultimately, people have a right to argue for what they think is best for the country. Other people will take a different view. But my view is that the best people to run Scotland are probably the people who live here.
I would agree. I would agree, and if I would be on the street with you, advocating for more power for the Scottish Parliament, and to have a more devolved arrangement, but to break away from the rest of the UK and put an economic barrier between us and 3/4 of our trade currently, I find it hard to understand.
Well, I mean, on the first on the point there about trade, I mean, I think my position, the SNP's position, the Scottish Government's position, is that we're not denying that a big proportion of our trade is with the rest of the UK, and we want to trade with the rest of the UK. We also, however, want to trade with the rest of the world and trade with particularly the rest of Europe, where 27 barriers have just gone up in terms of firms in Scotland who are trying to trade with the rest of Europe. So it's not an either or thing. We want to trade with both, and we think the best way to do that is to have the arrangement we did, which is to be in the EU and the single market, and to have a good trading relationship with the rest of the UK. I don't see how the two things contradict each other.
Yeah.
In terms of, your first point was about more powers. In terms of more powers, I certainly don't want to see anybody stand in the way of more powers being given to the Scottish Parliament. The problem is that there's nobody in the UK political system who wants to give Scotland any more powers. That's the problem, is I don't see any offer from any UK Parliament, any UK party rather, to give the Scottish Parliament more powers. It doesn't seem to be something which features in the UK election. It doesn't seem to be something that features in the policy of any UK party. So I think we would wait a long time if we waited for the UK to give us more powers.
More powers. Mm-hmm. It's such a difficult to be, and it's going to drag on and on and on until we have another referendum. As you say, we had a year and a half debate in 2013-14, after which the country decided that we wanted to stay in the UK, and I suspect the same might happen in the future. And it kind of bothers me sometimes that every single Scottish debate at the moment always comes back to the independence question, and I would rather talk about education, health service, and such.
I think for me the two things are connected, though. I mean, I think I agree with you. Too much of the political debate can be polarised, but you mentioned like health service and education and everything else. I mean, there is a connection between the constitutional debate and these things. You know, the Scottish Parliament gets a budget from a UK government. We don't get any say in what that budget is, or the overall budget. We don't have any or virtually no capital borrowing powers, with very limited powers in the area of tax. Therefore, the fact that power lies in all of these areas in the UK Parliament has a direct impact on education and health and roads and police. And, you know, that for me is why the two things can't really be separated out.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And I can see that as a case. And you have to take my word for this. You have to believe me that when I was planning today's show, I thought I did not want us in arguing about independence. I had
okay. It's a legitimate question.
I had no intention of having a debate with you, but it's fine if it came up, you know.
Absolutely, completely legitimate question to ask.
Sides.
Completely legitimate debate to have. However, I'm going to have to be rude. Go on to my next meeting just now, because I've got to do some constituency stuff just now. So I jump from subject to subject in this job. I'm sure you jump from subject to. You've got lots of different questions to ask different people, but apologies, I'm going to have to go. But it's been lovely speaking to you, David.
No, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show. And yeah, it's good to see you again. Catch up. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks.